Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us for our December meeting of the Coalition. I'm going to start with our land acknowledgements. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who've lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lumbee Nation and Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. Okay, today's topic is popular, winter shelter. It would be great if you could introduce yourself in the chat. And if you aren't receiving agendas for the coalition meetings and you would like to ongoing, please include your email address in there and we'll get you added to the mailing list. Okay, today's topic is winter shelter. And we have really wonderful guests today. So we have Ann Beck joining us from the health department to talk about the gaps and challenges in winter sheltering. I want to make really clear that by having this presentation today, we're not saying game over, there's plenty of shelter. There's plenty of need for shelter, but there are exciting things also happening with shelter. Also joining us is Kate Bishop from the Ferndale Community Service Cooperative to talk about her efforts with a volunteer winter shelter in the city of Ferndale, which is a new effort that we're super excited to hear about. We have Max Ortiz from Northwest Youth Services talking about the youth shelter they'll be operating at Civic Field. Jordan Rominger from Opportunity Council to talk about the Motel Stay program for families with unsheltered children and how that program has been evolving during COVID. And also Bridget and/or staff from Lighthouse Mission to talk about their partnership with Christ the King and their use of the drop-in center for winter shelter overflow. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm going to ask Ann Beck to please speak first. I know that she's got a time commitment with Whatcom Unified Command in light of all the flooding that our community is experiencing. So I think we'll go ahead and start with Ann, and then we'll go right to some questions for her so that she can get to those other issues that she needs to attend to. Thanks, Ann.
Terry. My volume's okay? You can hear me? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm going to start this by being a little vulnerable and saying it's been a hard day. And I know there's a lot of folks with hard days. I just want to let you know that if I get a little teary-eyed, that's what things are just hard right now. And I know they are for a lot of folks in the community. Normally when we talk about shelter, a lot of the time that we spend talking about is the great resources that we have been able to get online to build some capacity, but those folks are all going to do some of that talking today about what's happening. We're proud of the work of the city and the county to try to figure out how to build more ongoing capacity. So it's not just a crisis night by night, where can we find beds, but to kind of add that capacity. So we're grateful for all of the partners who've been able to do that. We've been trying to find severe weather shelter partners. You know, we were successful in 2019 prior to COVID. We were able to get, I think it was like 5 churches or so on board who were able to open up shop when needed. And we were able to, and we did some volunteer training and we got folks in, and that was a successful program. And then COVID hit. And I know I've shared this with you folks before that COVID has really limited our ability to be able to track folks down. There was one organization I was working with that was not faith-based that was going to look at being able to offer service. And then with the Delta variant and the numbers increasing, they just didn't feel like it was something that they were comfortable doing in their wheelhouse again. So even with vaccines coming online, it's just been a daunting task, I think, for some of the organizations. I'll say I'm out at the EOC today working on some of the flood stuff, and we're just so short-staffed, we're short-volunteered, and the capacity of a lot of folks is just maxed out. And so organizations have been doing what they can in their communities, in their congregations, but the bringing shelters online and being able to operate on a regular basis has not been something that folks have been interested in. When I've talked to churches, that were somewhat interested in participating. It was we can kind of donate some money for motel rooms, but we don't have the capacity or staff to be able to operate them. And even just in their buildings themselves, they haven't had a lot of folks in their buildings over time too since COVID. So that's been a part of it. And then there has also been, I think, from some of the folks I've talked to, there's just a little trepidation, I think, too, about offering shelter. There was a period where our faith-based partners, not all of them felt like maybe their services were going to be as valued or needed in the community. Not that that's the reason for doing it, but I think that there's last year was hard. There was a lot of stuff happening with our partners who stepped up and did a lot of things, and then sometimes the reaction and voices in the community weren't completely happy with that. And so I think it kind of, for folks who might have been interested in stepping in, it might have made them just a little bit more cautious about doing so. That's not the only reason, but I think that's one of the things that some of our other folks have talked about. But I think honestly, the biggest thing is that we have just not found anybody who's got the capacity to take it on. That is not to say we're not open to it. I'm looking at a lot of wonderful connected folks here, and we are happy to partner with folks. The thing is the government is not great at opening shelters. We're not trained for it, and to be quite honest, the buildings are not equipped for it. And so what we look for is those who have that desire, who have the space, who have the interest, or who are able to partner with other folks that might have those pieces that work and come as a partnership and say, well, hey, we can provide this staffing and this volunteer. Here's the building that's willing to let us do it. We want to figure out how to make that work. But we just haven't had that. We haven't had folks that have been interested or able to do that. So if my brain was in a better place, I feel like I would have been much more articulate about all of this. I'm just, it's not right now. So all of this to say is I am grateful for the partners who have been able to step in, because we have an increased capacity from last year by about 130 beds. I didn't check the recent numbers to see how full things are getting, but there at least has been that added capacity. So it's not also so emergent of we're opening shelter this night, but not this night. It's nice to kind of build it so that it's just ongoing and people know where they can go from this night to next week. It'll be the same thing. So I don't know, Terry, I feel like I did a very poor job of all that, but I'm happy to take questions from folks. I know there's probably some folks who want to share their thoughts or questions with me. So feel free. I don't know how you want to facilitate that, Terry.
I would say go ahead and shout out, or if you put your questions in the chat, I'm happy to read them. And I think I just want to kind of kick it off with a question, which I feel like I have an idea of the evolution of winter shelter, but between all the brains in this room, someone will correct me if I have it wrong. So what I seem to remember is that winter sheltering was exclusively volunteer faith-based, and really Interfaith was heading that up for a really long time and carrying that weight. And when they weren't able to anymore, that's when we looked to the mission to expand the drop-in center into a 24/7. And so this is like a many years process of trying to fill this gap. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I definitely think that's it. I think we're grateful for the service that Interfaith provided for so long, because it was kind of when shelter needed to be open, they did it. They opened doors and got it there. And then with the drop-in center kind of expansion, we were able to more folks were able to go in there, and they partnered with Fountain Community Church, who also took in folks and built some capacity during the winter. And then with Base Camp expanding even further, there's been more capacity there, and CTK has helped. So there's just kind of been this ongoing stacking to be able to provide the service. I think the thing that we are struggling with as a community and as a nation, I mean, homelessness is decades and decades of failed policy across the nation. This one community, as wonderful as it is, and as collaborative as it is, and as focused as it is not going to be able to end homelessness solely just within our own resources. It's got to be multiple levels of government that do it. And so we've been grateful for those folks like, Interfaith that did it for so long, kind of just trucking along. And we're open to figuring out how to kind of do more of that piecing together. But the ongoing thing is we're never going to have enough. And I know I'm the jerk for saying that, but there has to be a lot of resources from high on coming down policy changes, things like that, to really be able to meet the needs of this community and the state and the nation. There's just a lot to it there. So, sorry.
Thanks, Ann. Doug has a couple of comments in here, and one is that he's advocating for the need for year-round shelter instead of just a winter pop-up shelter, and I would agree with that. And then I think the constraint we have is resources, right? We don't have the funding to support that, the siting to support that, or the volunteers to support that. And is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah. It is, and my staff and I've talked a lot about the funding that we do get in, because there has been more funding coming from the state to do the kind of emergency sheltering, and from 2021 to what we're focusing in 2022, there's been, a significant increase in investment as well. So we're putting more money in there, and when you look at our bar graph, there's so much more going into the interim, the emergency shelter, than there is into those permanent supported housing programs, or even the rapid rehousing programs, which is where it can get people to more stability for longer periods of time. So we want to keep investing in all the levels, but we would really love to see some of those kind of more permanent areas getting more funding as well, and focus there.
There's another question here in the chat here from Indy that says, you said some churches have been willing to pay for hotels. What's the best way for folks to access this resource? I don't have an answer to that.
The motels can always kind of be tricky, just because it's whenever you go to a motel, they want a credit card deposit kind of thing. There's not necessarily, we don't have any kind of voucher system. I think for a long time we used the word voucher. There's no voucher that's being handed out to folks. It's very much been in partnership with agencies who are able to provide kind of that service to go with it. So for the motels that have been, or not the motels, the churches that have been able to do it, they've been donating to those agencies that provide those homeless housing services. So whether it's Lydia Place or Opportunity Council, or those places where those services are attached, because the churches aren't in a position to put their credit cards down and just move a family in without that support. So they go to the places where that support is and donate some funding there.
Thanks, Ann. Looks like Marcus D has a question.
Hey, Marcus.
Hi, good to see you again, Ann. I kind of want to pack it here a little bit. SOS is in town, Serenity Outreach Services. We reached out to government last February to let you know we're here to help. We haven't heard from you yet, Ann, and I've been meaning to give you a call. We have a major problem in our county right now, obviously, a national disaster. The people that we've seen displaced from the rivers and creeks around Whatcom County are uncountable, but they're in the hundreds. And many of them are missing, but that's nothing new in this. People go missing 5 minutes ago. So it's really hard. We're trying to make sure we track down people that we knew were camped along rivers and streams and stuff. We lost one person to suicide in the first round of storms. I've been begging public officials for emergency shelters. I've been begging government to allow SOS to host those facilities with your facilities. I've spoken with Seth Fleetwood, and he's told me that the Depot Market Square is the identified location, although it's not publicized, where we would have emergency sheltering if we qualified for it or whatever triggers it. This event we're in right now just ending, should have triggered it. A lot of people went to the ER. A lot of people had something that looked like trench foot on their hands. It's really bad. So we didn't respond there. And the whole time I want you to know I've been doing it, but SOS has been doing that. SOS has actually been trying to monitor who's out there, trying to help them. Yes, we will help you host. We just need the facilities to do it. Do we have enough volunteers? I can't quite say that. We haven't lined them all up like that. Volunteerism's been way down in the last year or 2 years, really, since COVID hit, right? They started hoarding toilet paper, and volunteerism really dropped too. I'm sure Doug can attest to that as well. I'm here. We're here. We're still here. We're not going away. Our name has been dragged around a little bit. Though I don't even want to discuss that in this forum. I will tell you though that we have support, okay, and from government leaders who want to see this work. So
thanks, Marcus. Did you have a question for Ann?
Yeah, is there any way we can help? You haven't contacted me. I'm wondering if we can help.
So Marcus, I'm just being pulled into the unified command thing just in the past day or so. From everything I know from this structure and the way it goes, it's going through the volunteer channels of unified command. I'm not taking anybody on, assigning them tasks. It's not how this, as challenging as the government systems can be, it's just not how the system operates. They have certain kind of areas for folks. So I will get the contact information for if folks are interested in participating in this response and connect you with them, and they can help figure out how to best connect you.
I'm afraid you maybe misunderstand me. I'm specifically talking about the unsheltered, visibly unsheltered people, the residents of Bellingham who are here right now, and that we've been talking about all along. The same ones that were on City Hall lawn, the same ones that it was my duty, my burden.
I thought, yeah, you referenced being out there in the floods, so I thought that was the piece you were talking about.
Right here in Bellingham.
As far as
Right here in Bellingham is what I'm talking about for clarity. So yeah, we do want to be those shelter providers. We do want this. We do insist that it is the government business to stand up those shelters. That shelter has been identified to me verbally in a private meeting with the mayor, but nobody knows where that shelter is really going to be. That's a communication that needs to happen. So I'm saying this to you, and I'm not asking any questions. Thank you, Terry. I'm saying to you, we need to immediately hold meetings to identify the shelter, the providers, who's going to sign the dotted line to be indemnifiable for it. And we need to volunteers as well as staffing. And we need to get a communication strategy out there so that we can let the people know that when it gets bad enough, you're going to go here. They don't know that. And so they're going to suffer and die out there because of that. Okay. We've got a problem out there in Whatcom County right now we have to deal with. 2 days ago, almost every single parked car and RV in Bellingham got tagged for removal within 72 hours. If half of them get impounded and they don't get back in, we're going to have a lot more people on the streets, or enough people to fill the 12 beds at base camp right now. We've got to do more right now.
Thank you, Marcus. And this is a good community to express that in, because everyone attending here has the same exact concerns and the same exact focus. So I really appreciate your comments. Thank you. There is another question here from Carolyn. Do you have numbers on the current need as of right now for the winter shelter beds? And is this concentrated in certain areas of the county?
I don't. So I know that the base camp is here today. I don't know. I think you're talking in partnership. I think that you'll learn a little bit more about the numbers of what the uses look like in the next few panelists. As far as I can only speak a tiny bit to the flood response piece because I'm just now dipping my feet into this work. That the Red Cross is moving on, so we're working on figuring out next steps for folks. It's going to be a really long recovery, so figuring out not only the short-term immediate needs of these folks who have been through some trauma and are in crisis, and figuring out how to support them as they rebuild. So I don't have those numbers for you right now. That's what we're kind of working on and figuring out how to best meet those needs.
Thanks, Ann. Looks like Kate had a question.
Yeah, thank you. You just mentioned the Red Cross is moving on. Do we have a timeline for when that's going to happen?
From what I'm being told, it's tomorrow. So we're working on. We've got the list of the folks who are staying there now, and we're calling to figure out how to get them to the next steps. Yeah.
Doug?
You guys can hear me, right? Okay. So what I wanted to say about winter sheltering is I think the reason why winter sheltering comes up at all is because in the winter there isn't enough sheltering for people who are out there in tents or out there in ways in which when it gets really cold they have to come to whatever's available in a desperate fashion. But if you have forms of sheltering which don't rely on the seasons, like if it's year-round in some way, whether it's base camp, whether it's Unity Village, whether it's Swifthaven, whether it's Garden View, that is ideal. That way the crisis never occurs. You never get to the point where, oh my God, there's a crisis and we have to suddenly adjust everything we're doing to account for this crisis for 2 weeks. And then everybody goes back out to their tents again. There needs to actually be a way in which things are covered and things are helped year-round so that the crisis never occurs. And that would be my main point I wanted to say on winter sheltering. I will add to this that Swifthaven was set up last year during when the camp was going on at City Hall, and we got set up and we got we were able to get operational within 2 weeks of when we were approved. We were able to get a whole village up, and everything was going good in 2 weeks through a 3-way partnership between the city, the county, and Homes Now. Homes Now managed the site, the county provided the structures, and the city provided the land. So, but what I'm saying is we can do this again, and the reason why we can scale up quickly without much money, and again, we're always on a shoestring budget. I will tell you all that at any one time, over the whole course of the life of Homes Now, since we've existed, we typically have less than $5,000 in our bank account. And the reason why we're able to survive over years under those circumstances is the fact that the people who live at the village are the people who run it. So there's people that won't do well in a community setting. There's people that will do well, but we don't have any paid staff. We're all volunteer. And since COVID, volunteers have been kind of dicey as far as relying on certain volunteers to do things, if you randomly advertise for volunteers. But people that live there are very consistent, very reliable. They live there, they need it, and they also want to help. And we go with a resident managed approach at both of our villages, and that's how we're able to scale up. So we could actually set up 3, 4, or 5 villages over the course of a reasonable amount of time in a short period of time, because we don't rely on that government money or income to the point where we would need lots of staff. We do rely on income. We rely on private donations, but it's not nearly as much as most nonprofits. So I'm just putting it out there.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate that. There's a question too, Anne, from HK Mobile, which I think is Heather Katad. And she says, Anne, would you let us know when Whatcom Strong is ready for us to share needs of flood-affected neighbors in Bellingham rural and urban area? They've been doing great work for North County residents. Are you already connected with that group?
So Whatcom Strong, I know, has been great at reaching out and connecting in the community. And we're currently working on trying to figure out how to merge the Whatcom Strong information with the unified, well, I don't even know if we're considered unified, we're incident command right now, trying to figure out how to merge that information because there have been kind of those two sources. So I know there has been some contact with Whatcom Strong. Heather, I think I didn't quite hear Terry's when she was reading your thing. If there's information that you wanted to get to Whatcom Strong, you're welcome to send it to me and I can make sure it gets to the incident command folks here. We're the ones that we're tied to those resources that are trying to figure out how to get folks in. So you're welcome to send me information, or I think Whatcom Strong's already talking to other folks here. So I don't know if that was what you were looking for.
If Whatcom Strong can communicate through some public channels when they feel they're prepared to take on responding to the needs of those outside of the Nooksack River, including the Bellingham urban and the country zones. I know their hands are really full right now, and if I don't know if it's the best timing for them.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank you, Anne.
Sure.
There's a question here about sweeps, but that's really aimed at this city. So I don't think that's really relevant to you, Anne. Are there any other questions specific to Anne's comments and presentation?
I will say, since there's so many of you here, I'm just going to throw this out here. One of the things I was trying to work on was also figuring out if I reached out to our large faith-based community list I have to see if any of them are willing to host 1 or 2 RVs or cars on site at their, I think it's pretty daunting for folks to take on a whole safe parking with lots of guests staying there, but to see if there was a way to see if people are willing to host on a smaller scale. So I'm working on trying to set up some stuff with that. I've heard back from maybe 1, possibly 2 places that are interested. But if any of you are affiliated with agencies or churches or whatever it might be that have a large parking lot, or have a place for folks to be able to be, and they might be interested in hosting 1 or 2 people, or 1 or 2 vehicles, so it doesn't get too much, let me know and we can try to help provide some resources for that too.
Thanks, Anne.
Sure.
Any other questions for Anne? Thank you so for being here. I know that it's a stressful day. I feel it too. And I just really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Terry. I appreciate you all so much. Take care.
Okay, moving on. Kate Hansen is here to talk about the winter shelter efforts in Ferndale, spearheaded by Ferndale Community Service Cooperative. Thanks so much for being here, Kate. Do you mind speaking to your efforts there?
Yeah, it's Kate Bishop now, just FYI, in case someone's trying to find me later, my email or anything. But thanks for having me. Kind of how I got here is a bit of a long story. And I do kind of want to share some of the details of how the process started early on, just, so you can kind of hear what the experience of trying to do something is like if you're interested. Well, for me, I'm the board president of the Ferndale Community Service Cooperative. We are a nonprofit that has, I think we have 9 different programs under us now. It's sort of an umbrella nonprofit, but we actually just changed our structure last night to be all one program because we got $400,000 from the city of Ferndale in ARPA money to hire a full-time executive director. So I'm really excited about that. Just because, as other folks have commented, these kinds of efforts are typically volunteer only. And that's been one of the biggest struggles for us so far is the staffing of the shelter. So I'm on the city council for like 1 more week. But it was something that, started on the city council in 2018. In 2019, started the North Whatcom Poverty Task Force, where we were studying the different kinds of issues that folks are facing up here, and outside of the main hub of Bellingham, and their difficulty accessing resources and all that kind of thing. So, one of our main our main recommendation was an affordable housing levy, kind of modeled after the Bellingham Home Fund. But that just failed miserably in Ferndale during COVID because taxes. And so we unfortunately had to let that go, but I don't know if I won't be there next year. So I don't know, someone will, continue that. But one of our next recommendations was doing a shelter. Well, actually, we were thinking more of a warming station because, I think that, I think in some of the smaller cities, the idea of a shelter is scary. And there's definitely this idea that we are going to bring people from Bellingham here, which is the opposite of the case. I'm like, I got beds and nobody's coming. So anyway, at that time when that recommendation was made, we had a mayor that was pretty reluctant to move forward with anything like this. We heard lots of things about, staffing, but liability issues, space issues, on and on and on. We got a new mayor, and I felt like I should have done this the winter before, but I don't know. It's just COVID. I just, had been trying for a couple of years and it didn't happen. And so I realized that, okay, it's got to happen this year because this is my last year on council, which is silly because this work actually has nothing to do with council now that I'm doing it, except for the fact that I got them to give me $3,000. So yeah. So anyway, I've realized, yeah, government is not, I don't know what it is exactly. They're not set up for this. And I would definitely like to see some changes there and have more partnership with the government. Um, uh, so anyway, sorry, I should turn these comments off because I get easily distracted every time I see one come up. So anyway, we have an organization or a program through the Ferndale Community Service Cooperative called the Volunteer Mobilization Center. And in the past, they have deployed volunteers to staff shelters. I think they did it in 2019. So to be honest, I'm not completely clear on how the VMC works, but it sounds like it's although it's a program under our organization, it's through the state, and they are able to staff, they're able to provide, I think, insurance. They make the volunteers temporary state workers, so there's some coverage, liability help. So I thought, well, if we have Emirates on board, why can't we just do it with the VMC volunteers? We don't have to worry about the staffing issue. We have the Pioneer Pavilion that could be a space. I cannot get them to let us use the Pioneer Pavilion. So I started looking elsewhere, and I reached out to a couple of churches that were part of Family Promise, which I think was part of the Interfaith Coalition, where they had homeless families stay for, I think a week, a year, or something like that. And they kind of went to different churches, and it was sort of a transitional housing thing. We had, I think, 3 churches and between Ferndale and Custer that were doing that. So these folks were somewhat more on board than I thought they might have been. And so we went, so through talking to the pastors there, and then them talking to their church councils, were able to get people to vote to host the shelters. Well, actually, we had 2 churches, and we were hoping for the one that's a little more accessible to be our primary church. And a second one is more up the hill, but they have a generator, so it'd be a great secondary church in case we have power outages. But it came to November 11th. I was watching the weather thinking, we've got some time. The weather looks pretty nice. Didn't really even occur to me that we were going to flood. I don't know. I don't know where I was in 2020 when apparently we had a flood, but I missed that. So, it didn't really occur to me. And all of a sudden, we're still trying to get training together, recruiting volunteers. We listed our volunteer. We went out for volunteers at the volunteer center, Whatcom Volunteer Center. We haven't even gotten one application. I maybe had about 8 or 9 people lined up to help out. But people want 4-hour shifts. You want short shifts. That's 8 volunteers a night for us. And if that's every single volunteer I have, people can't do it night after night. They work full-time jobs and that kind of thing. So anyway, so we got it. The flood came and someone messaged me, and I'm not judging on paid volunteers. I am an unpaid volunteer. So anyway, what I'm saying is we need more volunteers so that we can accommodate that, because wanting to do a 4-hour shift is reasonable. But, I just talk candidly, and honestly, some of the folks have been huge jerks to me about this. So I think it's really hard to want to step up and do this kind of thing. I didn't know I was going to get called an asshat in the Riveters Collective or whatever it was. So, people just have all kinds of things to say. And so, I think I just want to give I just want to talk about them for a second. Can we just like be kind to people? Because we're all just here trying to do really good work. And, it at one point made me want to just throw up my hands and say, fine, if I'm not doing good enough, then I'm not doing anything at all, because, people don't have the emotional capacity to just be like brought down all the time. So, but move past that, forget it. Flood's happening. We were so not ready, but we were able to, I had just gotten the check from the city on Friday, hadn't even bought cots. I hadn't even started a bank account yet because I needed to have the check to deposit it. So we were going to do that Monday, and then suddenly Monday we're opening. So we put the call out on Facebook and stuff. We got volunteers that brought cots and things like that. And I was able to find one other person a night to staff it with me. I was there a couple nights myself. And the second night of the flood, got pretty bad. And we ended up, the city started evacuating. And so they opened up at the high school, but didn't have anyone to staff it or knew anything about what they were doing. So we ended up partnering. We closed at the church that day and went over to the high school. That was only neat. I will say that was an insane day. The city put my number on Facebook. I got like 200 phone calls in one day, almost. And I was like, I still feel bad. If any of you called me to help and I didn't get back to you, I'm sorry. I did my best. But we went back up to the church the next night, which was great because now I have a much larger roster of volunteers that I keep calling on since the flood. I mean, not great, obviously, that we had a flood, but this, silver lining was, I guess, that it was urgent enough to get people on board. So anyway, I could honestly talk forever about this for hours. If anyone wants to talk more, if they want advice on trying to do something like this, let me know. Our original church decided not to move forward. They're going to meet again in December. And so, we just called on the backup church. But hearing things like, that they are reluctant to do it because of stories that they've heard from churches in Bellingham about, stabbings and things like that. And I think they came to me and they said, I think they realized how complicated this can get, like these situations. We were hoping to alleviate that by having, a program manager and volunteers that weren't from the church. It was a partnership. And so I'm hoping that through continuing to talk to them, we can find a way to move forward with that. I was a program manager at the Sun House for a little while, who does transitional. Well, it's technically an emergency shelter, but it's more functions like transitional housing for adults with mental illness coming out of the jail, and was, mental health case manager for many years, currently a Medicaid case manager. But my last day of work is tomorrow because I've realized that I can't do all of this while holding a full-time job. So I'm going to take a break and get this going. So anyway, I'm glad that we came to this meeting because hearing that, so the Red Cross shelter moved to Good News Fellowship, which is in Ferndale, I think just outside of the city limits. They also opened during the flood, which was great because our city was split in two by the river, and people couldn't go back and forth. And so we haven't opened the last couple nights. I mean, as the waters have gone down, it's been kind of warm, and we've got the Red Cross shelter here in Ferndale that's not full. We've closed. So hearing that, although we are on standby, but hearing that that's happening, I just reached out to Ann. So we're going to talk later tonight because the Red Cross shelter is closing. We can, open up at our church. But I will say, yeah, it takes, it's maybe I'm not trying to say it's such a big effort, you shouldn't do it. you should, but just kind of knowing what you're getting into, it is a lot of time. I send out an email to try and get volunteers to sign up for a shift, and nobody signs up. So, or 1 or 2 people out of like 10 respond, and then you got to call every one of them yourself. It takes me hours every day that we're open just to get a couple volunteers there somehow. So I think it's, we just need more partnerships. We need like government, volunteers, nonprofits, churches, all working together to share the load of this. I'm just sharing this because it's just some pitfalls that I've run into, so that maybe you won't run into that, because we got, thrown in before we were really ready. There was so much going on, it became hard to delegate. So I think that having, multiple people that are willing to kind of be in a leadership role, could be useful. But yeah, I'm excited for this, to just have this here. But I do think I saw a comment that was like, are you having trouble filling the beds? Yes, we have put the word out. I mean, the sheriff's department is sharing it. The fire department here, the police chief knows. We've had a couple people. We've been open 5 nights now, 3 nights for the first flood, 2 nights for this last one that just happened. And we've really just had a couple people stay the whole time. And we've told folks we will welcome those from Sumas or Everson or wherever, and nobody's coming. So I'm not really sure what the issue is there. Honestly, I don't know what how many people are at the Red Cross shelter right now, because we only really have capacity for 12 folks at our church, which it's not a lot, but it's 12 more beds than we've had in Ferndale, and it's met the need so far. So I'm so excited that we are getting an executive director. I'm putting that job posting up today, and we're going to be able to just have some more support for managing the volunteers, because that's really been the biggest barrier. So if you are complaining, please volunteer. I will happily take your help and advice. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much. I feel your pain. That winter that we ran that women's shelter at Civic Field was a real learning experience, and volunteer management is very time consuming and challenging. I want to open up to any other questions specific to Kate, and I thought I saw Doug have his hand up earlier.
Yeah, I had my hand up a few times. Like, there was a lot of things that Kate said that I agree with, but I will say that Homes Now as well is an all volunteer organization, and we don't have any paid staff at all with Homes Now, and we've actually relied mostly on, we do have some dedicated like regular volunteers that are not residents that we work with on a regular basis that have been with us for years. You know who you are. I thank you immensely. But most of our volunteers are actually residents themselves at both of our villages. So nobody at Homes Now is paid. That includes people that operate both villages. We house around 50 people, Unity Village and Swifthaven. We're not perfect. We have our problems too. But we operate 2 extremely stable sites, and the people that live at each site volunteer and run both sites. And if they were not able to do that, and we relied on outside volunteers to run everything effectively, then it wouldn't have worked. The reason why it's working is because the people who live there are the people who run it. And I go back to that we can scale up easily and quickly if we got a 3rd site or a 4th site or whatever, because we don't actually have to pay for staff. We don't actually have to pay. We do rely on private donations for us to survive in a sense, but like, we're always on a shoestring budget. So for example, Homes Now has always operated on the amount of money that one middle class person survives on. So like last year we took in $70,000. This year we'll probably even take in less, like $50,000. We house around 50 people, and each site costs around $1,500 a month to operate. And so if you think about how much it costs to operate a site and how quickly we can get online for any site we have, that's pretty good. And of course, we're not. There's things that other organizations can do, and people they can help that we can't help. But we are the best bang for buck option as far as like if you need something set up fast and soon and now, and at adequate standards without any like criminal stuff where there's danger where you'd have to call the police. We are able to answer the call. And that's what happened last year with Swifthaven. So Swifthaven, if we would have gone to the city and said, we would like to set up a second tiny home community, can you help us? The answer probably would have been no. But because there was a camp at City Hall and because capacity was full at base camp, we were called upon to, because we had run Unity Village effectively, can you set up another one in a short period of time? And can you take people off the lawn because base camp is at full capacity? And yes, we were able to. And Swifthaven has been around for a year now, or around a year, and it is stable.
Thanks, Doug. Did you have a question for Kate?
I'm saying that what Kate has been saying resonates a lot with what I'm trying to talk about, but like it's in a different way. But like I'm trying to say that if you have resident managed staff or you have people that live there that run it and are the volunteers, then you can do like way more, way quickly, while getting like way fewer people that are in tents. Like the tents will disappear. The capacity at like base camp or like other big shelters will be reduced where they don't have to have as many people there every night. And if you focus on a type of sheltering option like what we have that is year round rather than just in winter, it will lead to the fact that you won't need the emergency pop-up winter option. So that's all I'm trying to say. And I appreciate what Kate has been saying, but like that's my input on what she is saying and how to maybe like mitigate the future issues that might occur, because this happens year after year, right? So
Yeah, it does. You're absolutely right, Doug, and I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
yeah.
Are there any other questions for Kate?
Just want to respond quickly and say, if you could reach out to me, that'd be great, because we don't have residents to make volunteers. People have, so far the folks we have had stay there are not typically unhoused folks. They were there because of the flood. And so, they wouldn't have really probably be in a position to do that. And all the volunteers that I have gotten are work full time. So I love that idea. I would love more guidance and have conversation with you about how you find these people.
Sounds good. Can you please okay, I'll put my email in here.
Thank you.
And like please hit me up and I'll talk with you about whatever and ideas or whatever. Maybe there's some parts that make sense, maybe there isn't. Thank you, and I'll get in touch with you and we'll make shit happen. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
Kate, there is one question from Joe Gibson. Will the shelter in Ferndale be open for cold weather? And
yeah, I saw. Yeah, Marcus D is correct there. That was the intention, was to start as a cold weather shelter. It's a severe weather shelter because we knew there was other kinds of severe weather. But yeah, we were caught off guard by the flood. I'm trying to learn as much about that kind of thing as possible now, to be able to better respond to that in the future. And so is the city up here for sure. But and ideally we would be year round. Again, it's the churches have stuff going on during the day, right? And so being a place where people can actually live 24/7 and be open during the day and open the night, that's not going to happen at the churches. So I'm all for hearing new ideas, trying new things. I'm not trying to be a naysayer. I'm just, I don't have the answers for these things yet. So if anybody does, let me know. And if not, hopefully we can all figure it out together.
Thanks, Kate. We have another question. We have 3 more speakers to get through, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time and making the time to be here. But Melissa Wiesner, you have a question for Kate.
Thank you. I just wanted to tell Kate that I would very much like to get her information. I'm the executive director for SOS, and I want to definitely help her. I would like to help you get volunteers, learn how to find volunteers, and help you with any and all needs related to any sort of sheltering situation. I can't support that enough, and I just love your tenacity in this, and I hope to work with you further. So thanks for letting me speak. I'll let the stuff go on now. But yeah, she answered the main question I had, which was, were you gonna go year round and all that? So yeah, I just need to talk to you later, Kate.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody's time.
Okay, I think we'll move on. I just want to mention that I see the conversation happening about camp cleanups and sweeps. I want to address that, but I also want to get through all of our speakers who've made time and prepared to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the Lighthouse Mission. Bridget, did you have staff that you wanted to speak today, or is it you?
It's going to be me today.
Great, thank you and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome everyone. It's fun to see so many people here involved and participating, which is so great. So the Lighthouse Mission, many people are probably familiar with the general gist of the mission, and our continuum of care ranges from our outreach programs with Street Connect and Shower Connect and Joyriders. And then from there, the next part of our continuum of care is Base Camp. And that's our program that is probably the most visible and most well known. And that's our low barrier emergency shelter that houses up to right now 240 people, which includes our overflow shelter, which is being operated by CTK down on Holly Street at the old drop-in center location. And then from there, we also have our recovery programs. And so as we talk about winter shelter options, though, I want to focus in on Base Camp and our overflow shelter on Holly Street. So year-round, Base Camp operates a 200-bed shelter that houses single adult individuals at that location, along with, we have space for about 1 family at a time. And so that's any family configuration, a 2-parent household, single parent household, or whatnot. That space is usually filled, but when there is we're just free to feel free to do referrals to us and check in if that spot is open, because we definitely want to help families. And one of the reasons that we have that spot open is for families on the evenings, weekends. It's meant to be a very short-term spot to fill that need while other agencies may be closed and not available to take referrals or to get somebody connected to a motel. So it's very short-term, but it can help at times. And so Base Camp operates about a 200-bed shelter year-round. We have showers, 3 meals a day, case management services, connections and referrals to other agencies, a medical clinic on Wednesdays. People can come in with their pets, and we've had the whole gamut of pets. The only pets we don't allow are poultry and poisonous animals. And then it is a low barrier shelter. We don't urine analysis or breathalyze people upon coming in. We base somebody's stay on their behavior. And so whether or not somebody is being respectful for the rest of the community there is how we determine if it's an appropriate fit of stay. And so from there, we then do referrals and the intake process for the overflow shelter down on Holly Street at our old drop-in center location. And right now there's been around 26-ish people staying there on any given night. Last night we had 228 people between the 2 buildings, and we have 12 beds left that would be available for folks. And so when the flood first hit and the rain hit a few weeks ago, our numbers did increase quite a bit. And so it was within that week afterwards that we saw a significant bump in our numbers. And so I do believe that I have reports of people that have come that were staying along creeks and rivers and tents and encampments that chose to come inside then, and some people living in cars that were no longer able to be habitable. And so CTK runs the overflow shelter down on Holly Street. So they staff that with staff and volunteers. It's kind of a joint effort that way, which is, it seems to be working really well. They do an incredible job. They did this last year as well. And we're just so grateful for the partnership. And I know that over the years, Winter Shelter and our partnerships and that have taken a variety of iterations, and I won't go through the whole gamut of them, but it has been an incredible testimony to the community, the number of people that have stepped up in recent years. And that's not to say that there's still not a need for more of that. But just for the OC, how they stepped up, and Fountain Community Church in the past, and so many others in the community too. So thank you, all of them, and all the others that are here today presenting on Winter Shelter. It takes a whole community. And I think that there's definitely still room and still need for more. This is what we are offering in the community. And so I am open to questions about our Winter Shelter efforts. Check-in process, our check-in process, I should mention, is at 7 p.m. at the mission. And if somebody hasn't stayed with us the night before, we do a rapid COVID test upon entry at check-in. And so with so many people in one facility, we are trying to keep things as safe as possible while also keeping barriers down. And so that's part of our process there. We're glad that we can do those on site. So any questions?
There's one on the chat from Melissa. Oh. She's asking how people can connect with the Shower Connect program.
Oh, in terms of receiving showers? Yes. Okay. So yeah. So on our website is usually where our schedule is. That's the best place to find our most up-to-date schedule for Shower Connect. Currently, we are offering Shower Connect at CTK. At the main campus off of Meridian on Friday mornings. And so that's the current location. We are looking for other partners for Shower Connect right now. And so we're working with St. Paul's Church, Catholic Church out in, it's Deming right now, to work on setting up Shower Connect out there once a week. And then we in the past have worked with Salvation Army and a few other locations. And during COVID, we took a hiatus from Shower Connect because it was so volunteer run. And we're now in those efforts of rebuilding those partnerships and locations. So if you have suggestions too, we are happy to receive those as well. And then how many people have been refused services since the floods began and why? So Dana, sorry, it's so hard with so many screens here. No one's been refused services at the mission since the floods began due to capacity. And so if anyone was restricted from services, it was due to unsafe behavior and there was a necessary safety exit. But no one's been removed from services due to capacity reasons. I'm glad the showers. Marcus, I see that you're the showers guy. Ooh, we can be in touch. And Terry, did you see other questions in there? Looking through, I see Emily. Do you have a question? Emily HK? See her. Is that her hand raised? Oh, Terry, you're muted.
Terry, you're muted.
I think that is Heather.
Heather. Oh, yes. Heather, do you have a question? I see your hand raised.
Hi, thank you for your work. I am mobile right now. I can't watch the screen. My question is a request, two things. If somebody could read the info on the chats out loud for inclusiveness, to include people that don't have access to a laptop screen. And also if somebody could announce about the meeting tonight as far as base camp. What's your greatest, weakest link, greatest need right now that your local community can assist with during the next 2 to 3 months?
For the mission specifically, Heather?
Yes, because it's your
Oh.
turn to share. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bridget, thank you.
Well, thank you. Heather, that's very kind of you to even ask. I think, one of the things that I think is so important during the winter months and all year round, but particularly during the winter when the need is so great and the risks of being outside are so great as well, is correct information getting out there. And so each winter recently, I think that has been something that we've attempted, and sometimes it hasn't happened very well. And so any help that people can offer in getting correct information to the people that need the services, I think is so important. We want people to have the information that they need in order to be empowered to make a good decision for themselves and their families. And so I think that piece is so important. And I don't want to underestimate the power that can have in a community. So thank you for even asking.
Thanks, Bridget. And I want to, just to respect everyone's time, we have 2 more presenters to get through in the next 25 minutes, plus some updates. So Heather, I think it would be great if you make that announcement about what you wanted folks to know at the end when we have time for public comment. And if anyone would like a transcript of the chat, put your email in there. I'll be happy to send it to you. Any other questions for Bridget? Oh, there is one here from Des. How is the Lighthouse Mission planning to continue street outreach once the sweeps get heavy again during winter season?
Yeah, so we've been in contact with, well, I mean, I don't know if any of us know exactly how many camps are out there, but quite a few of the camps, and have been making weekly, if not multiple times a week, contact with folks. And so our goals right now are to continue to build those relationships, continue to provide those life-saving, necessary survival supplies that are out there. So whether that be water, sandwiches, blankets at times, other emergency blankets, first aid supplies, all of that. Our outreach team, the volunteer capacity of our outreach team has been increasing in recent months. And so I think this is just in time for the winter when there's an even greater need for that outreach. And we have also in the past 3 months hired an outreach coordinator. And so that person has been taking on the efforts of outreach as well. So those are some of the efforts there. And if there's some person or a camp that you think that it would be helpful for us to connect with that we may have not yet, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the comments. Wanted to mention too, I'm still going to be present, but I have a few kiddos here with me as well. And so I'm going to turn my screen off, but if I miss a question or something, I feel free to email me and I'm happy to respond. Thanks.
Thank you, Bridget. Appreciate that. Okay. I think we'll go ahead and move on to our next speaker, which is Max Ortiz at Northwest Youth Services. Are you with us, Max?
Yes, I am.
Excited to hear about what's going on at Civic Field. Are you using the locker room?
We are using the locker room, yes. Yeah, so we are doing a winter shelter for young adults ages 18 through 24. And we will be opening on the 13th. So just week and a few days, we'll be opening, and we will be open from 7:30 p.m. till 8 a.m. the next morning. And we'll be operating Monday through Sunday until March. But yeah, and it's for young adults, like I said. And we'll have resources. We hope to feed them, a hot meal every night, a little something to go on the way out in the morning with some bus passes so they can start their day, on a good note.
That's awesome. Are you operating now?
No, we do not start until the 13th.
And then what's the process for youth to get connected with that resource? I'm sorry, I should just stop and let you talk.
No, that's okay. So yeah, the process is, they'll show up. I don't really plan on turning anybody away. It's going to be cold, rainy, wet, snowy. They definitely need a place. that they can lay their head down for the night and stay warm. We can have up to 25, and it's going to be first come, first serve. And then they can save their bed for the following night. We will be closing doors at 10 o'clock. And if people are still waiting who haven't been yet at 10 and there's beds open, we'll let them in. Even if the person saved the bed from the night before, they have to be present before 10. If not, we're going to give their bed away to somebody who's there and is going to need it as well.
Thanks, Max. We got a question for you from Jordan. She's asking about young adult parents. Would they be able to bring their children there?
Unfortunately, they won't be able to. Like I said, we'll have resources on site. We would never just, say no. We'll make some phone calls and try to do what we can in our power and call everybody we can to try to find them a place for the night.
Heather, do you have your hand up for a question for Max?
No, I'm sorry, I'm mobile now and I'm not able to lower it. And I will listen and somebody else can make the announcement about tonight. Thank you, Terry, for your facilitation.
No. Are you done, Max? I don't want to jump in. I just have a bunch of questions myself.
No, yeah. I mean, that's really all it is just we're going to be operating for a short period, unfortunately, but it is for 18 to 24 youth who are exposed, that are homeless.
How are you getting the word out to young folks who may need this resource?
Really, it's just going to be word of mouth through our, through base camp as well, but as well as our day facility that we have called the Ground Floor that operates out of a church on Cornwall Street. So, and it's the same age range for that. So it's really going to be through, we expect to see a lot of youth from there and then their friends as well.
I see a lot of folks from outreach on the call today. What would be your advice for outreach folks who encounter a young person to get them connected? Can they just drop in there?
Yeah, just send them.
10?
Yeah, send them before 10, or even if it's during the day, send them to have them go to Ground Floor, and they can get connected through me during the day with that.
And do you have any needs for volunteers, donations, or stuff like that?
Yeah, we're definitely in need of volunteers. Would be helpful. And donations, of course, are always welcome, from anything from, bagged goodies to any blankets, pillows, pillowcases, anything really. We can never have a shortage of, of anything, just like any winter shelter.
Yeah. What's the best way to connect with you on that? I mean, you probably put your
I can drop my email. Yep, I'll drop
Great.
my email in the chat for everybody if they need it or if they have any other questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Max. And I really appreciate you being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Does anyone else have questions for Max?
I just popped in and say thank you for being such great partners and wonderful providers in Bellingham. You guys have always been top notch. I'm glad to see you doing this work. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else before we move on? Okay. Last but not least, Jordan, thanks for hanging in and being willing to come in and talk about our community's efforts to motel families with unsheltered children.
Thanks for having me. I'll just keep it kind of brief so that there's time for questions. I did want to give a little bit of a historical context of what motels for families have looked like over the last year and how that's evolved a little bit. So traditionally, the shelter for families with children in motels has been just a winter seasonal program that operates from about November to March due to funding constraints and things like that. But because of kind of the influx in funding and things like that Anne mentioned earlier, we have, and the need that we're seeing, we have been able to continuously provide some motel shelter for folks since, I believe, like fall of 2019 at this point. We did have to stop taking placements at a certain point between March and August of this year because we had about 70 families and we didn't have enough funding or capacity at that time to keep placing people. Starting in August, we did start placing folks again. We traditionally, motel placements work through the Community Resource Center. Families can reach out and get a screening and then meet with a motel case manager to work on that placement. Because we had a pause on our placements for about 6 months, we did have a lot of people on a waiting list that we knew were going to need that shelter. So since August, when we received additional funding, we've been working our way through that list, reaching out to people that were in the pool that we knew had unsheltered children to start placements with them. But I'm really excited that starting on December 13th, so the same day that the youth shelter will open, we're going to be able to start doing same day motel meetings with case managers again through the CRC, because we're almost caught up to the backlog that we had during that 6 months. So a family will be able to, in most cases, unless we have, so many people calling in one day, in most cases, they'll be able to at least meet with a motel case manager the same day that they're calling into the Community Resource Center. There is some eligibility around this. Like Anne mentioned at the beginning, we don't really give out physical vouchers. It's a program for families. So there are certain eligibility criteria that have to be met. One of them is that the adult that has the children with them doesn't need to have custody of them. They do need to be literally unsheltered, staying in a vehicle, on streets, or in a place not meant for habitation. That is the priority for those motel placements, to remove children from those situations. And they do need to be below 50% of the area median income. We will be collecting some documentation to show that eligibility is met. But case managers and the Community Resource Center will be talking to clients about how to collect that and supporting them through that process. And so if a family, seems to meet that criteria, they can feel free to reach out to the Community Resource Center. That's at Opportunity Council's main phone number, extension 0. I can put that in the chat when I'm done, or Terry can. But the first step would be to reach out to the CRC. They'll do a screening. They'll talk about source documentation. They'll schedule that same day appointment with the motel case manager. And the motel case manager will reach out to them. Once they are placed, they will receive ongoing case management every week to work on goals for their family that the client can kind of set. Typically, that looks like referrals to employment resources if people are looking for that, trying to get them set up with benefits, and just trying to create some wraparound connections and services for all those families and help them move out of that not ideal shelter situation. Motels are not perfect for families by any means. Trying to get them referred to other programs or into units, go through coordinated entry to get subsidies and that kind of thing. So I think that is the general overview, and I am happy to answer questions about that.
Thanks, Jordan. I have a couple. One is, I was wondering if you can speak to, I know when we talk about capacity, we're usually thinking about staff or dollars, but what does capacity look like in room availability?
It's been pretty challenging. Actually, we have somebody, he was on the call earlier. He's here. Chuck has been working with us to try to develop some more motel partnerships because we've been really struggling with room availability. It seems to be getting a little bit better as the weather gets a little bit worse in some ways because people aren't traveling as much. Although, of course, with folks being displaced, some of those units are being taken up by those folks as well. So we have had issues where sometimes we do not have a lot of space in the motel partnerships that we're working with. But like I said, Chuck is working really hard to kind of expand those partnerships right now. And we've got some promising ones on the horizon, I think. So hopefully soon we'll be able to increase capacity in that way too.
That's awesome. Good job, Chuck. I was going to ask you the impossible question, which is, you don't know yet, of course, what do you think is going to happen as the people needing shelter because of this massive and traumatic flood also compete for these same rooms? And that's the impossible question, but I guess I'm trying to say, that's my fear, that we're going to see competing for the same resources with other folks who also need it.
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, we've chatted a bit with Anne about the motel partners that might be open to sheltering people so that they could reach out to those people. Of course, that does mean that some of those rooms may, we may be competing for rooms, but we did, share those resources to try to help out with that. So we'll just kind of keep expanding as much as we can and working on capacity.
Katie Stevens has a tough question, kind of a good question. Could a family be eligible for the program if currently in a hotel paid for by a charitable organization?
Typically, no. Typically, the prioritization is for folks that have spent at least a night unsheltered, because that means that they really have exhausted all of their resources. From time to time, we are able to make an exception depending on some like unrestricted funding or the type of funding that we have for motels. But typically, the priority is to just get those folks off the streets. But I also understand not wanting them to have to return to the streets. So I know that's a hard thing. But typically that is the overall priority is folks who have already been unsheltered. But they can always reach out. And if we have the capacity, we will do everything that we can to help them.
She has follow-up questions too. Do families receive case management while staying in the motel to help find more permanent housing? And how long do families stay in the motel?
It really varies. They absolutely do receive support in looking for more permanent housing. So we partner, Community Services does the motel program, and we partner very closely with the Homeless Service Center to kind of keep everybody, keep everything accurate with their situation in the pool to make sure that if they get selected by coordinated entry, they're eligible for different, more long-term programs because everybody goes through coordinated entry to get most of those resources. We have been able to utilize Treasury rental assistance to help a few folks move into units as well and get some support for several months for rental assistance in addition to that. But that is the ultimate goal for sure, is to kind of assess the length of subsidy that folks need and the length of support that they'll need to really stabilize and move towards that and out of the motel.
Doug is asking, what is the success rate?
What is the success rate? That is an excellent question. I think some of that is going to depend on what you mean by success. I think success is defined in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people. I think we have a lot of folks moving into rapid rehousing, which tends to have some pretty good success rates. It is challenging even in rapid rehousing right now because there are so few units available in the community that families with subsidies are competing for those. But I know that that's something that's being discussed and worked on too. It's kind of that balance, like Anne was talking about, of emergency housing and more long-term unit development and permanent supportive housing and all those kinds of things.
Chris put some statistics in the chat too to that. And then it looks like Marcus has a question for you as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm up, then yeah, I'll be glad to. I just want to kind of remark on moteling and that, it's kind of interesting when we talk about success in moteling. Yes, we kept them from dying last night. That's success in moteling as far, and we've done a lot of moteling when I was with Homes Now and further on with SOS individually as a citizen. But I just want to chime in to say that I've had several different conversations with, as I have several different conversations with government leaders. One of the things that we are talking about often that is met with serious thought right now is we buy a motel, because we're going to need to be able to provide those rooms regularly, and without competing for it, we need to centralize. It's part of a pyramid that I see as trying to bring the visibly homeless, as I call them, the people who are left out right now, bring them all in, and we could do it turnkey. That's whatever. That's along with SOS's plan. That's along with the plan that's been presented to government clear back last February. It's all a matter of record. I call it Foursquare, but we also need a motel, and this is part of that, guys. And so when we think about moteling, we really need to sharpen our budget back down to just owning the facilities, because that's an obvious win financially. Thanks.
Motels are expensive. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Des, you have a question for Jordan?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So to my understanding, so it seems like your program works very closely and works very well with some other local organizations like OPCO. I understood that, right?
We are a part of Opportunity Council. We're in
Okay,
the Community
perfect.
Services Department.
Perfect. And I know that, like I've seen them in action. I know that OPCO does utilize a street team. So how do you see like city and county sweeps impacting your collective efforts to get resources shared and linked up to people and get data, like important personal data, locating these folks and families? How do sweeps impact all of those efforts?
That's a good question. I think in my experience, more people are finding us than we're even able to support sometimes. I think the families that need resources are finding their way to us a lot of the time. I obviously don't know that for sure, but we are seeing high volumes of families that are reaching out. We have really strong partnerships with the school districts too. So that's a good way that we connect with people that have children in school at least. And then Opportunity Council also has an early learning and family services department that connects with even folks who are younger than school age. So they refer over to our department for that as well. I do know that HOT does do a lot of outreach though, and they connect with us as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but people do seem to find us in large numbers at this time.
Okay. So yeah, that does answer. And thank you for your honesty. It seems like the sweeps kind of catch all the people that don't fit into the program already. Sadly. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Jordan about the Motel program for families with unsheltered children? Okay, we have 5 minutes left. This is going to be a challenge. I have an apology and a correction on the agenda. The City of Bellingham update, that's Katie Sullivan is doing that. And it's no longer Samia. And Katie, I wonder if you have a few minutes to give us an update.
Of course. Thanks, Terry. I'll try to kind of get through these relatively quickly. I have just a few updates of note. And I ask folks, hold your questions till kind of I get through these different items. But we'll start with the winter shelter updates. So I had some updates here, but they've pretty much been covered by our city's partners and the counties earlier regarding kind of different winter shelter options in the community. So I have nothing really more to add to what they've said, other than I just want to reiterate the city's gratitude to our partners and their continued work in ensuring a robust winter shelter strategy. We're grateful for their work on this front. We'll continue to support them. And that's all I have to say about winter shelter strategy. Moving on to notice of funding availabilities. I want to flag with this group that the City of Bellingham is set to release our notice of funding availabilities next week on December 6th. As a reminder, this year we'll just be releasing capital project NOFAs. The NOFAs for services contracts are released every other year, and we happen to be in an off year for those. So the NOFAs that we'll be releasing next week will just be for housing development projects and facility development projects. So those applications will open next week, and then the deadline for those applications will be in the new year, in late January 24th, 2022. I will post a link to the site where the NOFAs will be available. So please feel free to pass along to anyone that you think may be interested in responding. Hot team expansion, an update there. So the city is working to fund the expansion of the hot team in the community. The goal here is to increase the hours of coverage and support the important outreach efforts of this program that are already underway. So this expansion is underway. Please stay tuned for more updates on this, but wanted to key you into kind of that ongoing initiative. Circling back to winter shelter updates, I forgot to mention one update and one plug is if any of our partners on this call have any upcoming giving opportunities or fundraising opportunities, if you could please connect with me. I would love to kind of fold those into our winter communication strategy efforts and make sure that members of the public are aware of any opportunities to give and fundraise. I'll put my email in the chat after these announcements, and feel free to reach out to me. My last update is on the Families with Children interim facility. Quick update there. So GS Consulting, the consultant team who were contracted to do perform the feasibility analysis and perform the initial scoping work for this facility, have completed phase 1 of this project. Phase 1 of the project involved kind of a deep dive into the community's homelessness data, especially as it pertains to families and children, interviews with different community stakeholders, many of whom are on this call, and as well as families with lived experience, and reviewing other comparative facilities in other communities. And then ultimately making a recommendation on the facility concept and the operational concept of the facility. So after completion of phase 1, it was recommended that the facility concept be a core facility containing between 25 and 30 units for families experiencing homelessness located within the city of Bellingham, and satellite units in communities serving families outside of Bellingham. This recommendation was ultimately agreed upon by the core planning team for the project. And now that a project concept has been outlined, next steps for the project are to identify a project owner and a long-term operator of the facility, outline a complete capital, operating, and services feasibility analysis, and prepare a capital ask, and select a project architect and select a site for the project. I will send Terry a PDF of the phase 1 report, and perhaps she can circulate it with the meeting minutes after this. So feel free to review the report and follow up with me if there are any questions. And that's it for updates.
Thanks, Katie. We're at time, so I understand if you can't stay, but I have time to keep going and get through the agenda, so I'm just going to keep doing that. No hard feelings if you need to bail. Any questions for Katie? Dina has one. What about the safe? Thank you for repeating this, Dina. I remember you asking that earlier, and it just got lost in the chat. It's been so busy. What about the safe parking option that the city of Bellingham had an RFP out for last year? Would the city put out another if parties were open to operating and providing expertise and help with space for doing that?
That's a great question. To the best of my knowledge, I wasn't around last year when this RFP was released, but my understanding is it generated not a lot of responses. I don't think it got any, frankly. But I know there's been some interest since then, and folks have reached out to Hampton County with questions about this. And so I think that kind of these initial conversations are ongoing, and we're happy to kind of participate and support in any way. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out if folks have any leads or any ideas.
Thanks, Katie. Oh, the YWCA might be interested. Thanks, Amber. That's exciting in the comments. So yeah, good to hear that there's interest. I think that we'll keep going unless there's more questions for Katie. And see, Barbara, if you're able to give some updates for the county.
Actually, Chris is going to do
Chris.
that. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're all doing the swap around on you, Terry. I don't have anything that's super exciting. I know we're short on time here, so I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder and make a shout out for point in time count volunteers. I know people are starting to drop off here, but the point in time count is coming back on for 2022 in January. It's going to be pretty much a full-blown point in time count with a few pretty minor limitations for safety's sake around COVID. But we would love to have people assist with that surveying. The more people we have out there, the more complete it'll be. The better we're going to understand the situation in Whatcom County with both sheltered and unsheltered homelessness, and the better our responses will be as we're more informed. The few things I was going to talk about were just like budget stuff, the county spending an unprecedented amount of money, but it seems to not be keeping up with demand. We'll get a better sense of that when we check the pulse in January with the point in time count. Eviction prevention is a big one. There is still eviction prevention funding. Opportunity Council is your go-to source for that. If you or anyone you know is behind on rent, please contact the Opportunity Council, the Welcome to Suite Resolution Center, as well as Law Advocates and Northwest Justice Project. We're kind of creating not a trio, but a group of 4 that are working pretty hard to make sure that eviction prevention gets out as fast as it can. They have helped hundreds and hundreds of households already avoid eviction. So that's something that's great. That's been a huge boon for our community. In the sense of saving time, I'll just leave it at that, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Des has a question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sound check. Thanks. So like in the nicest way to word this, I've always understood the point in time count to be historically ineffective because it only counts people that you like visibly see with your eyeballs. Is there a way that you're working with, I think I heard the last speaker talk about a hot team expansion this year. Is there a way to kind of include that in the funding for the hot team expansion to help with making the point in time count more effective this year and onwards?
I have the answer to that, I think. The hot team is actually really instrumental in reaching those unsheltered populations, and especially those that are in encampments that are really hard to reach. And every year they set aside an enormous chunk of time dedicated to this purpose. And I want to talk about the point in time count in general, because the methodology, well, I know is not perfect. We all know that. We all know it's an undercount. But what you might not know is that every community has to do this. And this is something that HUD requires. So we have to follow that methodology. So for example, I don't think January is the greatest time to do a point in time count. I wish we had the freedom to not only bring back Project Homeless Connect, which is really lacking since COVID has come on, but I mean, that's the time to count people, I think. But my big opinions aside.
Or during large encampments.
Yeah. But
Totally.
My opinions of that aside, something to understand about our community that is kind of special is that big communities, you're right, Des, they just go by and there's a person that looks like they're sleeping, check one, right? And that's how they get their count. But our point in time count is survey driven. And these volunteers that Chris is soliciting on my behalf, thank you. And that's one last thing I have to talk about. They're being trained on how to conduct a survey so we can get meaningful data to make decisions. So that's something I'm kind of proud of, and really hoping we can get a good, robust effort for counters in the point in time count, hoping we can connect with Western and get some students involved in this effort. So yeah, did that help answer your question at all?
Yeah, I guess like my question was more focused on like what is going to be the hot team's expansion and involvement in this, if any.
Oh.
Just to I know it's like not a super effective survey, but like just to make it better. Will they be involved?
Yes,
Okay.
They definitely do. I mean,
Okay, so more feet on the ground. Okay.
Frankly, the majority of the surveys that are completed do come from the hot team. But I also want to mention that when we have a count, this is kind of a misperception we have about the point in time count. And I know we're over time, I'm sorry. But when we're counting people who are experiencing homelessness, we're counting unsheltered and we're counting sheltered. We're counting people who are in programs that are not considered permanent housing. So people who are staying at the Mission, for example, will get counted. People who are staying in emergency shelters that use the HMIS database will get counted. So we're counting folks that we're serving in shelter and people who are unsheltered, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's great information. Thank you.
I'd like to just jump in real quick if I can and push back a little bit on the word ineffective. We know the count is an undercount. We know it might be inaccurate in some sense of the word, but it's definitely not ineffective. There's a lot of good information that comes out of it. We do pretty much the same method year after year, so we can trace changes over time. And there's just tons to be gained from that count. So we're not going to tell you that this is every single homeless person in the county that we've counted and gotten all this information from. But what we will see is trends that change over time to let us better calibrate our responses to that.
Right. I guess I was just
And I'll
looking
jump
for
in
like,
real
I was just
quickly.
focusing on improvement. Right.
Great.
So,
I
there's
want to
always
jump
room
in
for
real quick
improvement.
too. I just want to say that we need to communicate to our government, to our leaders, that point that we're all acknowledging that it's an undercount and that it should be used as a graphic. And I agree, it's great work. We need that, but we need to acknowledge where it really sits too, so that because they really base it on these real numbers, guys. Remember that. So whatever that point in time count is, that's what the city's counting on right now, and the county too. We've got to correct that a little bit. Thanks.
Thanks, Marcus. Any other questions or discussion about the point in time count? Happens in January. So we're in the recruitment phase now. And usually we have a meeting with a training on how to administer the survey and where to go. And it's a pretty big effort. Okay. I think that brings me to my update, which I don't have to talk about the outreach expansion, although we will be soliciting 2 additional outreach members that we're pretty excited about. There's a lot of need in the community, and something that people may not realize is that our current hot team of 4 plus a supervisor are in the team 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, which means we don't have 4 people out there every day, because you can't work 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. So we have thin coverage in a couple days of the week, and this is really going to help us to round that out, especially on particularly busy days like Mondays and Fridays. And we're hoping to expand this into the evenings a bit too, so we can have some overlap. The last thing I wanted to mention, as far as the Homeless Service Center update, is that we've talked about it in this meeting before, but we're participating in a partnership on the way station project at 1500 North State Street. And that's in partnership with the health department, the county who owns the property, Peace Health, and Unity Care Northwest. And so right now we're in the permits phase, and there is a public meeting coming up on the 6th. So that's next Monday, that anyone can attend to ask questions and get more information about that. And just to give you a quick idea of what the way station is going to look like so far, is that half of it is day centered. So Unity Care has clinical services there, and people can come in and get showers and use laundry facilities. And then the other side of this way station is really separate from those day services, and that's really intended for respite care from people who are too ill to be discharged to the street, essentially serving homeless people who are leaving Peace Health but really need more time to recuperate. So those are the 2 parts of the way station. I'll be speaking at that meeting. And I anticipated an expansion of the hot team to serve kind of in that respite care, respite counselor role 24/7 in that facility. The other thing I wanted to do is let you know about Heather Katad's update. And she said, shoot, I lost it in the chat again. I'm happy that there's a busy chat, but then I can't find it. There is a meeting tonight. I think she said it was Bellingham. Anyways, there's an opportunity for public comment at it. Dina, do you have more information on this? Will I look for the actual comment that Heather made?
Had to find my unmute button. I think what she's referring to is the Planning Commission at 7 p.m. tonight for City of Bellingham is having some kind of a presentation, but it's a public hearing. It's not just a presentation. It's registered as a public hearing related to homeless services. And I have no idea what the content, there wasn't any details about that on the agenda for tonight. So I don't know what it's gonna say, but that is happening tonight at 7 p.m.
Thanks, Dina. That was really helpful. I appreciate it. We have a little bit of time for public comment. I know we're 12 minutes past, or additional topics. Does anyone have topics to suggest? You can put it in the chat, or some very brief public comment before we adjourn today. Dina.
I just wanted to say that, you know, it's really good to hear a lot of different input, and a lot of it was really encouraging to see a lot of enthusiasm expressed for people trying to network at the meeting today and provide help to different agencies, between agencies, or between individuals or new organizations, and that's really helpful to see. And I just wanted to kind of caution against, I think I've written a letter to some agencies related to this, because I know I have heard some voices from the health department, Whatcom County Health Department, kind of voicing that idea of we are never going to be able to shelter everyone. And I just wanted to caution against that as a form of messaging. While I understand definitely supporting the idea that we really need to get state and federal agencies involved in helping to support this, and we definitely need long-term solutions where we are addressing the root causes of homelessness. But I also think it can be a really self-fulfilling prophecy to be telling people that we can't possibly shelter everyone. And during a time where we really do need to network, and we really need even more help from the community, more volunteers involved, more people being engaged as they never have before, because our unsheltered population is so far increasing and threatens to increase by the looks of things. We're in a really serious flood emergency, and who knows how many people that will actually kick out into a more long-term type of unsheltered situation. So I think it's really important for us to not be saying we can't possibly do it, because we need to be able to do it as much as we can. So I just really encourage people to maybe focus and message on the positive part of that, where we're actually engaging people and encouraging them to get involved, rather than using messaging that kind of is defeatist. So I just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
I really appreciate that, Dina. Thank you for saying that. Any other comments? Yes.
Hello.
I hear you.
Great to hear. Can you hear me?
Yes. Did we lose Des? Any other comments? I want to say one thing before we go. It's kind of a half-baked idea, so apologies for not being articulate, but I'm not known for being articulate, so why am I saying that? I see so many people here who care about this work. I see so many people here who are doing outreach. And while I recognize I'm excited about adding outreach, I have to also acknowledge we're not adding units of housing. So all the outreach in the world puts people where? The answer to homelessness is housing, and it's affordable housing. And the sweeps or cleanups or any of that is painful. It's painful for people who experience it. It's painful for people who serve the people who experience it. And I'm not even just talking about outreach. When I think about our coordinated entry staff who are like constantly trying to find people, right? And they're leaning hard on outreach. They might be calling Hadrian and Joe from Compass. They might be calling Katie's team from Unity Care Northwest to find people who become displaced when they're asked to relocate. We'll just say it like that. And that's hard. It interrupts housing opportunities. When we've got someone on the verge of housing and then we can't find them, and we have pressure to fill the bed, because how absurd is it to have an empty bed when we're working to solve homelessness, right? But then what do? Do you go to the next person just because you can't find this person? So I just want to acknowledge that it's hard. It's a hard topic. I don't have the answer to that. I also don't control who gets cleaned up, why, or when. But I want to acknowledge that it's hard. It's hard on all of us. So we all care. I know that. And the answer is to get people into housing so that they don't have to live in shelters, and so they don't have to live in encampments or in RVs or cars or whatever thing people do to survive because they have to. So there, I just said it. That's my thought. Doug.
I agree with you that the solution to homelessness is housing. But when you're talking about shelter, all of the types of shelter aren't just one thing. There are shelters that are like housing. And so we feel like as Homes Now, for example, that we have a sheltering model that is very much like housing. We don't have any paid staff. We're all volunteer, but mostly the residents that live at each village are the ones volunteering. And our track record over time has shown that both sites are extremely stable and able to maintain. Think about it. You know, if you live in an apartment, right? Is the apartment manager or is the company that manages the apartment responsible for the mental health, you know, every individual problem, the case management, every individual problem that somebody might have that lives at the apartment? No. They're just there to ensure a stable site, make sure that there's no crime and stuff going on. Just like with us, like we welcome any service provider to come in and provide those extra services, but we provide villages in which the people that live there are the people that run it, and they are stable, and we can scale up quickly. And yes, it is shelter. It's not full housing, but it is shelter that is like housing. And you know, if you're somebody that lives in normal housing, you're expected to pay your bills, work with others, get along with the community, make sure your own life is doing good, like cover your own expenses for the most part. So that's the kind of sheltering we provide, and of course it's not for everybody, but like it's just something to consider that yes, everybody should have housing. If they did have it, we wouldn't need to exist, but there's plenty of people out there who are very low income. Maybe they don't have what they need as far as basic like living expenses, being able to cover that, but they are capable adults and able to manage a site effectively. And that's how we can scale up quickly if like we ever got a third or a fourth site and being able to get up in like a week or two. Like that's kind of how we do it and how we have done it. And we're not perfect.
What I love about Homes Now is that you have a place that is yours, with a lock on the door, that is warm, a place to keep your belongings, a place to clean your body, a place to store your food and prepare it and eat it, and a place to have community. Those are
and independence.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Like Indy wanted to say something.
I was going to say though that it kind of in response to Doug. I mean, as you even suggested, that isn't really for everyone. You know, some people do need that supportive side of it, the case management and everything else, and some folks aren't able to manage a place, and that really that makes it a hard problem, I think.
I agree with you. But what I'm saying is, like, we're talking about right now, right? Like, base camp is full. We're full. We're at max capacity too. Other organizations are full. And I just look at it as we need options, right? And so Homes Now is an option. Garden View, Lehigh is an option. Base Camp is an option. Opportunity Council is an option. Lydia Place is an option. And if you have all these options combined, we might actually be able to make a dent in this so that people aren't like just laying on the street or whatever. And that's my main. And I'm not trying to say that we can serve everybody. We can't.
Right.
But we can serve a lot of people, and that's all I'm saying. And I agree with you, but illustrating the other point of that it's just one option of many.
Right. A diversity of tactics here is,
Exactly,
the
yes.
best approach. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oops.
Agreed. Thank you, Andy and Doug. Heather, did you have another comment? Okay. Thank you so much for your extra time.
Hey,
I
Terry.
appreciate this conversation. Go ahead, Heather.
I just posted a link if Chris could take a look at it, and you too. In past years, the health department has posted a very accurate day-to-day update where shelters are located in the winter. Last time I checked, it was not as accurate as it could be for the upcoming freezing months, and I don't recall it having any details for youth. So I know the health department's swamped, and Chris, I posted the link. If there's anybody at the health department that has the same skills as Ann does to chase around what shelter is open and what is closed and have it posted with a date of the update on that channel, that will help the communication link between those on the street without internet access or without cars to drive around, and those of us that are seeing them and listening and assisting. Thank you.
We can do that, Heather. Thank you. Okay, I guess in closing, I have one more thing to say. And to Dina's comment about the languaging as being so important. And it reminds me of, I joined the Balance of State is like a HUD group of small counties, right? We're in the Balance of State. That's our continuum of care. And so that's who governs our work in many ways. And I was participating in the committee in this group for these 34 counties of which we are a part. And this was the subcommittee for single folks who are chronically homeless. And they were talking about the mission of the group. And someone said, I don't know, do you think ending homelessness is just too lofty? And I was like, well, I freaked out. Like, if we don't think we can do that, why are we here? We have to hold that belief to make it happen. If we don't envision that goal, we're not going to get to that goal. So I just want to thank Dina again for that comment. It was really, really good. Heather, do you have another comment? I see your hand still up. I don't want to skip anybody. Okay.
No, go on.
Okay. Well, that was my little soapbox for today after a really long meeting. That I just am so appreciative that you all care so much to spend that extra half an hour. You made it's a 2-hour meeting, but it was really helpful and I think useful and appreciated. So thank you so much. Next meeting, let me tell you when that is. It is February the 3rd, first Thursday of the month, every other month, 3:30 here on Zoom. Make sure your email gets in the chat if you want to make sure we get you on our mailing list, and we'll see you then in February. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry.